refreshing to hear that you have a set of principles that you judge all legislation to. Speaking of legislation, we're going into the 88th legislative session. Am I right?
Yes, sir. You're
We're,
absolutely right.
we're going into that, and there's a lot of things going on in Texas, Senator. Um, it's and by the way, thank you for your service from a Navy dog to an Air Force guy. Um, thank you.
Thank
Um,
you for yours.
Appreciate that. So there's a lot of things hitting Texas right now. And I kind of wanted to go ahead and cover some of those things. If some of you don't know, Senator Bob Hall covers everything 35 East. Basically, that's all his District 2. So down Waxahachie, Ellis County, all the way out through Van Sant. That's what Senator Bob Hall covers. And so that's why I wanted to have him on, because he does have a little bit of Ellis County. So Texas is experiencing some serious issues, and one of them is the grid. We had that snowstorm, and we had or our frozen Mageddon or whatever it was called, and there was a lot of people that suffered. There's several people that died. It was rough on Texas. There was a bill passed, and the governor said there's been things to address. Do you feel that the grid problems and our energy production has been addressed adequately? What would you like to see in this legislative session when it comes to that?
Uh, the changes we made were needed to be made, most of which were administrative and process changes. But we haven't really done anything to physically protect the grid. And we still have natural and man-made threats that haven't been addressed at all. And so we have a long way to go there. Fortunately, earlier this year, a man by the name of David Tice produced a documentary, about 55-minute documentary called Grid Down, Power Up. And it's about our electrical grid system, about the threats to it, both natural and man-made. We talk about cyber threats, about physical attacks, about EMP, GMD, and even weather. And we haven't yet addressed those so that we have a resilient and reliable system. Our grid has been significantly weakened from a reliability and resilience point by the amount of solar and wind power that we have on it, and the fact that we have had dozens and dozens of very good, clean, coal burning plants that have been shut down by environmentalists that have weakened our capacity. And we've been operating all summer at a level that is actually in excess of what our capacity really is, because you've got to have more capacity than you're operating, because things break. And that's what happened to us back in Snowmageddon, is we had power generators go down as they were trying to come online. We barely have enough to meet the demand. We are very, very fortunate we got through this summer. And I just pray that we don't have a harsh winter and have another shutdown in the wintertime. But we have got to recognize that our enemies out there know we're vulnerable. We have the threat of the EMP, not just from nature, from a coronal mass ejection, which we know about. We've known about that, and they happen all the time. We just haven't had one recently big enough to take out the power grid. We did in 1859 when it took down our entire telegraph system. If we had one that size today, it would take our power grid down. But the Chinese, the Iranians, the North Koreans, and even the Russians, they have an EMP weapon that only takes one small nuclear weapon detonated a few hundred nautical miles, a couple of hundred nautical miles above the central part of the United States, and at least 90% of our electric generating capability from coast to coast would be wiped out permanently. And we have testimony in hearings from the power company saying that it would be a permanent shutdown. And that would be disastrous, because electricity is the second most important thing to sustaining life today. Most people don't even think about that. But you think about it, people without electricity, most people can't even tell what time it is.
Yeah.
Literally. Because without electricity drives everything. The only thing more important than electricity is air. Because people will live longer without water than they will without electricity and food. And you don't even get water. Most people would not get any water without electricity, because you wouldn't have pumps to run the water.
I
So
know, I know that because I'm actually Puerto Rican and I got family in Puerto Rico that just went through that hurricane and went through Hurricane Maria, and
yeah,
no power or no water or neither, and
yeah,
it's a tough situation.
right. We're not geared for it. We have migrated in this life to total dependency on electricity for everything. The computers turn off and turn on most everything around. Uh, pump water, pump gas, oil, you name it. Our trucks wouldn't run, cars wouldn't run, nothing electronic would operate. We'd be back in the 1800s and not equipped for it. I mean, the people in the 1800s expected to live with a shovel and a hammer in their hands and do things by hand. Today, they don't. They're not geared for it, and particularly those folks who'd be up in the big cities would be in deep trouble.
Yeah, an EMP would definitely take us down. It's scary to even bring that up, but it's a reality. It's
Yeah.
something that can happen, and it's possible. And
And,
something
and the
that
fixes are and the fixes we know what to do, and we now know that it's not near. Everybody been touting it being very expensive. We now have hard evidence that it's not going to be very expensive at all. Matter of fact, the most recent estimates I've heard from some people that really studied it's about $100 per citizen to harden our grid. That's not a steep price to pay when you think about the cost of not doing it and having an event. What price do you put on our way of life? Because our way of life would be lost permanently with this. And so whatever the investment is well worth it.
Senator, I've spoken to most of our local government officials and my representative here in Texas, and um, one of the things that I bring up during my interviews is taxes with the local entities and with the state entities that I've talked. I talk taxes. Property taxes are forcing people out of their homes, and while there has been some reform in the last legislative session, I think uh, that there is serious problems there. Senator, what are some of the things you'd like to see in this legislative session addressing taxes, property taxes?
I would like to see us on a path to replace property taxes uh, and do whatever we need to do in expanding the sales tax base and use our revenue growths to replace our property tax so that people can actually own their homes. It's not something we could do in one session, but we could certainly put ourselves on a path to use the growth to start weaning ourselves off of it the way we're currently doing it. The challenge will be to have a system that keeps the local taxing entities from continuing to grow taxes, even though the state is picking up more of it. It's going to be a real challenge because of the different differences from county to county. 254 counties in Texas. They're all different. Some generate a tremendous amount of sales tax. Others generate almost no sales tax at all. We have populations that range from, bigger than some states to down to whole counties that are smaller than a single town in other places. And so a different economy in them. It's going to be a challenge to structure something. But I think it's time that we sat down and said, okay, we've got to do this, and here's how we're going to set the plan to expand this and make more of a consumption tax to wean ourselves off of property tax.
That sounds good.
What people can't say is we just can't say let's get rid of property tax. There's are functions of government that need to happen, and it's not free. We just have to make sure that we're not paying for more government than what we need, and we're not paying for government functions that are not needed, and that we make it a more fair tax. And I truly believe the consumption tax is by far the fairest of the taxes.
Okay, consumption tax. Now, one of the other issues that's hitting Texas is the border crisis. Now, immigration is the purview of the federal government. I understand that, but our state plays a role and is playing a role, and our state is probably one of the most affected by the amount of, what is it, 2 million in this fiscal year that have come over, 2 million illegal immigrants. That's a lot. That's some of the cities in Texas bigger than that, and the size of San Francisco. of people coming in, and it's unsustainable. And now we know that Governor Abbott has shipped some to different places in New York or in other places where they complain about a few, but it is a real crisis. One of the things that I've heard is, declaring it an invasion, and that gives the it gives the governor some powers. I wanted to get your thoughts on how Texas is handling this, and what would you like to see?
Yeah, well, it's truly it's almost a Gordian knot that we've gotten ourselves into with our relationship with the federal government, and when you get people in office who purposely are trying to hurt the country with what they're doing with their immigration policies and removing the border, where we have a rogue, it's really a rogue federal government we have now that to me is morally breaking the law by refusing to enforce the law, which puts us in a tough position. And I would say maybe even the position that that our founding fathers were in when they decided that the tax on tea was an immoral thing for the king to be doing to, and they took it into their hands to express their concerns with it by dumping it in the bay up there, and or what the men on Lexington Green did when they said, enough is enough. We're not going to take any more of the oppression. Now, I would in no way advocate any violence. However, I do think that it's gotten to the point now that I would agree with Ken Cuccinelli, who has laid out a path for the states to be able to declare it an invasion. It doesn't have to be a military invasion. It is an invasion, and the states have the right to stop that invasion. And I think it's time that we took that position. I would be very supportive of it and say, okay, let's take our manpower we're putting into this thing. And instead of busing the people to New York, it's cute, it's nice, it gets people's attention, it gives the noonday talk show something to talk about and laugh and giggle about. But let's just load them up and take them back. Let's take the action to stop them from coming in. Let's take the action the federal government is not doing. I'd say let's take the steps and enter into an interstate compact with another state to do this. Offer it up to the Congress for them to approve it, and to say whether you approve this or not, we're going to do it, and we step up and do it. We try our best to follow the law. We're going to do an interstate compact, and it's up to you. But while you're working on it, we're going to go ahead and do it. And I think that if we did that, the federal government would have to take some action. There are some that say anybody that does that would be subject to federal law, could be thrown into jail for doing it. Hey, the guys at the Boston Tea Party could be thrown in jail for what they did, but they had the courage to stand up to protect liberty, to protect the people, and to protect the way of life. And I think it's time that we grew a backbone here and stood up and took the action to say enough is enough. I just heard today, by the end of this year, that number that you just mentioned, it'll be 5 million people by the end of this year, the way it's going. And what concerns me about that, these are not refugees coming into this country. These are people who have traveled 10 countries away, that if they were trying to escape their oppression in their country, they've gone through 10 countries. They could have stopped in any of those and accomplished that. This is an orchestrated effort that's taking place. And if you look at what's coming in here, there is an inordinate number of young men between the ages of 18 and 35 that are very fit, that are coming in here declaring asylum. They're coming in from the Middle East and declaring asylum. Well, they could have swapped any place along the way and done that, which is what Trump had in place and what should be put back in place again. And if the federal government is going to act illegally, and I truly believe that what they're doing is morally illegally, if not technically, and it's time that we got a backbone. We stood up and said, enough is enough. We are going to take action, and we're going to stop them from coming in here. And I think we would get Arizona to join with us. I think everybody but California would join with us. I think other states would come down here and help us actually do that. And we do it by saying, let's do the interstate compact and say, we're trying to do this legally, but we're going to do this. It is time that we stood up and did it.
Well, that is a strong stance on it. And I definitely, it's something that I've also looked at, and that number that you said, 5 million, that's staggering. That's beyond comprehension, of that many people. And there was recently, there was some video that I saw, where DPS stopped 2 Pakistani gentlemen. I mean, they came all the way from Pakistan, folks. They had somewhere to stop for to that where they wouldn't be oppressed. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, no, these are not people, not Mexicans that's coming in. They are the small minority. Very few Mexicans. It's everybody else, and it is not consistent with what was intended with the asylum law, that was the asylum exception that was put in there. And so it's time that we stop that. Period.
Definitely, definitely. Okay. So another thing that comes up, because I covered all the budgets between Waxahachie and Midlothian taxing entities. I know that we talked about property tax, but one of the things that came up is how we fund our schools. I got a better insight into how we fund our schools from reading some of these budgets and talking to some folks. And I guess it's a very convoluted thing. And, you know, like only 6 people in this whole state understand how these schools are funded. Senator, is there something that you know, what are your thoughts on the way we fund schools in Texas? And would you like to see any changes?
I would like to see it made less complicated. I think that I agree with that. It is way too complicated. And you're right. There are very few people that truly understand it. But because of the nature of the size of Texas and the differences in the demographics of the states, and trying to treat all students as equal as possible, is going to have to be a mix of where we get the money and where it's going. I think a concept that ends up where we fund students without strings, and there's a great argument out there about concern about school choices. I'll use that term, of alternatives to the way we're funding now, to give students and parents a choice. But I think that has to be worked out in it. And I think we can work to make it less complicated, but I don't see how we'll ever get to where we don't have the Robin Hood aspect of it, where we have some counties that have a whole lot of money and a whole lot of influence, and we have others that just barely have enough population, but they do have students that need to be taken care of, and there's no way they could totally self-fund it. And so I don't know how you cut it different ways. It's going to be a redistribution of money to some extent in there. I mean, the extreme is, it would be let the counties have at it, do whatever you want to do. That wouldn't work. And to say, okay, well, the state will pay for it. Well, that's fine, but where are we going to get the money? But we're going to have to find a revenue source for doing it. And it's going to end up with a distribution. And the way it's set up is to try to match the amount of money that's needed based on where the kids are. So there's a different amount that goes because there's a different mix. It's not like our students are not all the same. We have some places where we have special needs kids that are greater in number. We have English as a second language are greater number in some areas and harder to teach. So the teaching education function is more strenuous in some places than it is in others, which means that there ought to be more money going there to try to get the outcomes. Because I think we need an education. We need to have more focus on the outcomes that we're getting from our students, rather than just worrying about how much money is going into the school and what's happening there. Because right now we have, the sad part is I haven't seen the most recent numbers, but I know the last set of numbers I had showed that we only have like 38% of our third graders can read on grade level. 38%. Yeah. And if you go to the seniors, for those that are deemed college ready, we only have 8%. Wow. 8% are college ready. And so I think instead of people being focused so much on the money aspect, we need to turn around and get the focus on outcomes and achievements for education. And we need to get focused back on reading, writing, arithmetic, history, and civics, and cut back on some of these woke programs like SEL, social emotional learning, CRT, and things of that nature that have crept in there, that's taking up time in the classroom when they could be working on their times tables, on their cursive writing, or learning how a constitutional republic actually functions. That's where we need to have the focus. So there's as much need to focus on what's being taught and the outcomes as the money going into it.
Right. And there is like two sets of logic. Arizona went to a voucher system, first of its kind. And, there's others that say, let's improve this system. Let's get back to basics. Let's get back to teaching these kids what they need to know, and not how to think, but, or just to critically think these things and think about them, not just follow along with whatever they're told. I want to talk to you too, because I think that you're on the veterans committee too. And I wanted to ask you, what are some of the things that you'd like to see in this legislative session? Because I did talk with Mr. Palladino. We had a great show, by the way. You guys can scroll back and see that. We had a great show where we covered all the veterans benefits in Texas. Senator, is there something that you'd like to see, or some problem that you've seen that you've been addressing when it comes to veterans in Texas?
Well, the biggest problem that it keeps being brought to me is one that we have little control over, and that's our medical services to our veterans. That's handled by the federal government, but I would say the overwhelming calls I get are people concerned about what they're not able to get, or their treatment in medical care. And I don't know what we can do there, but again, that's an area where if the federal government isn't going to do their job, Texas is going to have to figure out some way, like we did with education with the Hazelwood Act, where we recognize the need for how important education is to set it up so our veterans and their families were assured of being able to get a college education. We may have to look at a safety net for veterans to make sure that they're getting the medical services that they need.
Yeah, it might be something that, and as somebody who's gone through, a disabled vet myself that has gone through that system, I can tell you it is the federal system, the VA system is
right.
It's
but I also know that right now, Texas does treat its veterans very well. Here in Texas.
Agreed.
Very, very well. We've got good services and work with them in getting jobs and training and education. So Texans are in pretty good shape. We just need it. It's like the other side. We just need the federal government to start doing its job. That's all. We send them a lot of our tax money, and they just continue to fail to do their job.
And they spend and they spend and they spend on everything.
Yes.
So it just grows. It's a behemoth that grows. Well, Senator, I would love to have you here all night, but unfortunately, the show has to come to an end at some point. So I wanted to go ahead and just give you a chance to go ahead and directly speak to the people of Ellis County, Van Sant, the counties that you cover, the areas that your district, and just kind of talk to them, level with them, tell them about what you're doing in the future. The microphone's all yours.
Well, thank you. Appreciate that. We are in some trying times right now. We are facing some real challenges. A lot of what's happening is coming from the national level that we don't have a whole lot of control over, but we can be influential here in Texas. We are a government of the people and by the people. And unfortunately, we have far too many people who have abdicated their responsibility or their role in government by not showing up to vote. We get excited about having 25% of people show up to vote. And that's just not the way it's supposed to be. We need to have more people involved, paying attention to what's going on, learning more about the people who run for office. And I would say that 25% that show up to vote, 90% of them will call somebody just before going to vote and ask who they should vote for. That's not the way to get good government. We need to have more vetting of those who are running for office so that you get people in there that are going to do what you want them to do. And that takes some time and effort, but we have an election coming up that I can't tell you. I know it's a thing that said every election, this is the most important ever. Well, in this case, this one does have some extra special importance to it. You see what's going on in Washington. You see what's happening with the people in charge that have gone to the woke side of what they want to push. The programs where they want to continue with the mutilation of young children for transgender surgeries out there, and drugs that will chemically castrate boys, cutting the healthy body parts off of young kids to satisfy mothers or fathers that wanted a girl or a boy and got the opposite of it, so they decide they're going to fix it themselves, and creating someone who has 20 times more likely to commit suicide. We have got to have a government of people that will stop that kind of thing. We've got to have a government that recognizes that our election system is out of date. We don't have a system that has true accountability. We don't know how accurate it is, and it has no transparency to it. Matter of fact, there are only two things we actually know about our election system here in Texas, and that is that in any election, some number of people show up to vote, and when it's over, a government agency announces who won. And other than that, we don't know anything else about it. It's all hidden in the electrons that are in there in a process that is in a black box that very few people even know what's in there. And we have to change that. We have to simplify the process. We have to stop using very expensive computers to electronically put a mark on a piece of paper that you could easily do by hand with a 10-cent ballpoint pen and be confident that the mark you made is what you wanted it to be. We have to completely restructure our election system so that we have great confidence in the winner, and we're going to have to show up this time in great numbers to make sure that happens, so that we can take back control of the House and the Senate in Washington and stop the insane things that are going on. Because if January 6th doesn't scare you to death, then you have not been paying attention, because we have a government up there now that has thrown our Constitution out the window. We have people being held in jail now since January 6th of 2020 that have not even been charged with anything. And the most they could charge them with is a misdemeanor. And yet we have judges that are going along with that. We have people being arrested, houses being raided for things in which there is absolutely no reason to do it at all. And that is the scary part. When our judicial system, the thing, and the FBI come off the rails it should scare everybody to death, because there's nobody to bring them back into line again. And the only way we're going to fix that is by showing up to vote this next session. Definitely. And I'd say right now that is the biggest challenge out there. Go to vote on election day to make sure that your vote is counted, and take all your neighbors with you, just so they're going to vote to the right. And I say to the right because we do know that God is a conservative. He tells us in the Bible that he is several times. Over 150 times he tells us that he's on the right. Ecclesiastes 10:2 said the heart of the righteous leans to the right, the heart of the wicked leans to the left. And he puts the sheep on his right and the goats on his left, and he sits at the right hand of God. And we know he's even involved in the free market system, because what did Jesus tell Peter when he went down to the shore, and Peter had been working at a small business all night and hadn't been successful at it? And he said, Peter, lower your net on the right side of the boat. And he caught more fish than he could bring in. So
I haven't heard all those examples, but that is I like that. I like that.
I could go on. There's about 145 more of them.
Yeah.
But the truth is, this nation was founded on Judeo-Christian principles, and we've kind of let God down as we've drifted away from it. Unfortunately, the one thing Obama did say that I agree with is that we're no longer a Christian nation. I'm afraid I hate to say it, but that is the truth, and that's something we have to change. We have to have the third great awakening.